Hi, everybody. Welcome to On the Money. I'm Maria Bartiromo. My conversation with outspoken economist Paul Krugman is ahead. Why this Nobel Prize winner says the deficit doesn't matter now and why the government needs to spend even more money. He ran two of the nation's largest and most important companies and turned around General Motors. I'll talk lessons learned, the state of American business, and the future with Ed Whitaker. And baubles and bling. If you've got the cash, they've got the jewels. The perfect Valentine's Day gift if you have deep pockets. Jewels, anyone?
Coco always wore two.
On the Money begins right now.
This is America's #1 financial news program, On the Money. Now, Maria Bartiromo.
Here's a look what's making news as we head into a new week on the money. It is the U.S. government versus Standard & Poor's, the most aggressive move yet by the Justice Department to hold accountable a financial company at the center of the financial meltdown of 2008. The $5 billion civil suit charges S&P intended to defraud investors by giving securities created from subprime loans AAA ratings they did not deserve. Standard & Poor's attorney says not so fast.
The ratings that were issued were believed by the people who issued them. And that's what the government has got to disprove. The government's got to show in this case not that a lot of people lost money because of their investments. Government has to show the Standard & Poor's literally disbelieved its ratings.
Meanwhile, it was a choppy week for the markets. The Dow, with its worst day of the year on Monday, falling triple digits and then getting most of that back on Tuesday. The markets rebounded later in the week. So what's next?
I still think we're going to have a correction. The market started the year with investors pretty complacent. Now they're almost euphoric. Everybody you have on the program thinks the market's going higher. The market, when it has a good January, usually has a great year. There's a general feeling of comfort, and we've got a lot of hurdles that we've got to get over.
And Dell is hoping a new deal to go private will compute, the company announcing the largest leveraged buyout since the financial crisis with a price tag of $24 billion. The deal is being led by the company's founder, Michael Dell, and the investment firm Silver Lake. And if you're waiting for that check to arrive in the mail on Saturday, well, you might have to wait a long time. The U.S. Postal Service announcing it will eliminate Saturday mail delivery beginning in August because of the red ink to the tune of $16 billion last year at the post office. Congress still has to approve the measure, which would save $2 billion a year. The force is with Star Wars fans everywhere. Disney, which now owns the franchise, says there are more movies on the way. CEO Bob Iger told me to expect the first new film in 2015.
In fact, we are working on a few standalone films. Larry Kasdan and Simon Kinberg are both working on films derived from great Star Wars characters that are not part of the overall saga, so we still plan to make Star Wars 7, 8, and 9.
And he is a Nobel Prize-winning economist, a New York Times columnist, and a best-selling author. Paul Krugman's book, End This Depression Now, is now out in paperback. He joins us now to talk more about it. Good to see you, Paul.
Good to see you.
Thank you so much for joining us. So let's start with the debt and deficit, since this is really front and center as part of the international conversation, as it may be. The CBO, Congressional Budget Office, came out with new projections this week. They show long-term the economy will move in the opposite direction of the deficit. The economy grows if the deficit goes down. It shrinks if the deficit goes up. You argue in the book that the deficit really doesn't matter right now. Do you disagree with the government's projections?
No, I think the CBO report is pretty reasonable. And it says that we wish we had lower debt. And if we look at the long term, it would be nice to pay down the debt, but it does not show a crisis. And trying to slash the deficit right now will deepen the clear and present danger, which is of very high unemployment and an ongoing economic slump. So I found the CBO report basically supportive of what I'm saying, that right now our priority should be jobs, not the deficit.
I want to get your reaction to something Dave Camp told us, the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. I spoke with him this week. He said that we need an equitable approach to cutting and spending. Take a listen. I want to get your reaction to it.
Sure.
So what we really need now is the second piece of the balanced approach the president called for in December, which is the beginning of reining in our debt and deficits. Again, on the president's commission, they said that when the debt gets to this level of the economy, it again costs us millions of jobs.
Yeah. So there is not a hint of evidence that the deficit or the debt is a problem for the U.S. economy right now. Now, clearly, other things being the same, you want to pay down your debt, but you don't want to do it at a time when it will lead to sharply higher unemployment, which is what would happen right now. So this is a myth, whereas we have overwhelming evidence that slashing government spending when the economy is depressed significantly deepens that depression. So this is a convenient myth.
But we've seen what happens in Europe. We saw the debt strangle countries in Europe. Now, you're saying in the book we need even more government spending right now to stimulate the economy. How much would you like to see that spending be? Where does it stop? When do you expect all this debt and deficit to start choking us? When do we
by the way,
stop?
the European story is not at all. The European story, this is amazing. People have somehow managed to forget very, very recent history. Spain, Ireland had very low levels of debt when they came into the crisis. Now they have deficits. Now they have debt, but it's because of the crisis, not the other way around. Greece is a completely different story. And of course, we're nothing like any of those because we have our own currency, which gives us enormously more freedom of action. How much now? Actually, in the book, in End This Depression Now, I call for about 2% of GDP, which is around $300 billion a year, which is very easy now. Mostly it would take the form of aid to state and local governments to rehire the school teachers who've been laid off, to restart the pothole filling that's been canceled because of budget constraints. That's enough to get us a long way. That's enough to get us pretty close to full employment right now. You stop it when the private sector has repaired its balance sheets enough so that the economy is growing strongly again, and when the Fed starts raising interest rates, which it will do eventually, that's the time when you can safely cut government spending, because then you can make a deal. The Fed will not raise interest rates if the government is cutting spending, so there is no net effect on jobs. So it's about when we get off that zero lower bound, to use the jargon, on the interest rate.
Now, the president this week asked Congress to pass a set of limited spending cuts ahead of the sequestration. I want to ask you about the sequester, the mandatory spending cuts, which Congress imposed on itself. They take effect March 1st.
Right.
How does this play out?
Well, it's a bad thing. I mean, so the correct answer is we shouldn't be doing any of this. This is all fundamentally stupid. Now, I understand that the president has to deal with political reality, so he can't just say that and make it all go away. But now, it's important. The sequester is not as scary. The debt limit was scary as anything, because nobody knew what would happen if the United States didn't pay its debts on time. Financial crisis, nobody knew. This is just this is a dumb austerity policy being imposed through bad legislative history. So it'll hit the economy. If we go a month into it, it's not a catastrophe.
Let me ask you about the State of the Union. The president giving his State of the Union address this upcoming week.
Right.
What are you expecting him to say? What do you hope he'll say?
Oh, wow. You know, it's a funny thing. I'm not all that psyched about the whole thing, because I think he can't pass legislation given Congress. He's mostly what he needs to do is defend the achievements of his first term. And presumably he will do that, and he'll talk about good stuff that needs to happen, but most of it won't happen. I'm sorry. I wish I was more upbeat about this, but given the deadlock. Which is why a lot
of people feel like his main goal is to get the House of Representatives back under Democratic rule, and I'm just wondering why we're constantly trying to get reelected. Let's solve the problems of the country rather than constantly trying to get reelected.
No, but let's be fair about this. The fact of the matter is, the two parties have radically different views of what this country should be like. Right? Democrats have a view of a fairly strong social safety net, fairly high taxes on rich people. The Republicans really want to roll the clock back to before Franklin Roosevelt. Those are honest differences of views.
Very quickly, what kind of an economy in the U.S. are you expecting in 2013?
Okay, if we manage to more or less sidle past the sequester, I think we're in actually pretty good shape. I think housing is coming back. I think there's a virtuous circle developing. So the private sector is actually on the road to recovery unless the government screws it up.
All right, we'll leave it there. We'll be watching. We'll come back to you and talk to you soon about it. Good to have you on the program.
Good to be on.
Thank you so much. Paul Krugman joining us. Up next, we're on the money, overcoming government motors. The man who helped rescue GM and ran AT&T tells me about the state of American business today. My conversation with Ed Whitaker is next. And later, a gold star for a one-of-a-kind in the jewelry industry.
There's 23 different stones, 15 different cuts, all of the same material. It's like a rattle for a big girl.
As we go to a break, take a look at how the stock market ended the week. Back in a moment.
What we have to do is to provide them with assistance, but that assistance is conditioned on them making significant adjustments.
That was President-elect Obama in 2008 on the coming bailout of the American automobile industry. Those significant adjustments included the bankruptcy of General Motors, just days after my next guest came out of retirement and landed in the driver's seat at GM. He's Ed Whitaker. He was the longtime CEO of AT&T. He knew nothing about the car business before serving as chairman and CEO of GM from 2009 to 2010, a story he tells in his memoir, American Turnaround. And Ed, it is great to have you on the program. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
What a great read. Your book has some terrific lessons of the trade. You say, it's not magic, it's management. Businesses are not democracies. What did your role in the bailout and such a challenging time for the country teach you about managing and about management?
Well, I've always thought management was responsible for what happened. This taught me once again that's a true statement.
Right. So it's about leadership. It's about
leadership.
The lead. What were the biggest problems at GM that you couldn't not have known before you arrived in Detroit?
Well, I thought GM had a vision, but when I got there, I found out they didn't. And so I thought it was very important we establish a vision, which we did early on, which was to design, build, and sell the world's best vehicles. After that, it was a matter of getting the right organization, organizing things, eliminating matrix management, empowering the people, and miracles happened. It was great.
Amazing. It's amazing that the stock had gone from, what, $60 to $3 in a few short years.
Right.
But that's an interesting comment. You thought they had a vision and you realized they didn't. How can you continue operating in business without a vision and nobody understand, no one knew it?
I don't know. I asked a lot of people when I first got there, what do we do? What did we do wrong? I got the answer, we did nothing wrong. The economy got us. Well, that begs the question, why didn't it get all the other automobile or vehicle companies? But there was no vision. I asked people what we do here, and I didn't get very satisfactory answers. So early on, we decided what we did here, which was design, build, and sell the world's best vehicles.
That is fantastic. So GM saw a huge re-IPO in 2011.
Right.
How safe is the American automobile industry today when it comes to the ability to develop products and sell great products to the public?
I think GM's in great shape. I think you just look at the results and you'll see it's onward and upward. There are a lot of new vehicles under development, many being introduced this year. I think they're on a great course.
What about American business in general? From your days at AT&T, you worked with Steve Jobs on partnering AT&T with the iPhone at its launch.
Right.
You talk about that. In the book, you've looked at companies that pondered too long and lost out. Talk to us about business in general. What you've seen over the years, how has American business changed?
You know, I hear a lot of talk about uncertainty these days. A lot of people are sitting with cash. There's always been uncertainty. I remember back in '90 when I became chairman of AT&T, there was a lot of uncertainty, be it regulatory, be it whatever. But I think uncertainty's always been there. I think we're going to live with that. But I think now's a great time of opportunity.
Yeah, but what about the idea that the regulatory environment is getting tougher, from the EPA to, the financial regulators, Dodd-Frank, Basel? Business today faces a different regulatory environment than in the past couple of decades, no?
I don't think so. I remember early on acquisitions we were going to make at AT&T. It was tough. We didn't know. We spent a great deal of time in the political part of the business and the regulatory part of the business. It was touch and go. I'm not sure it's changed so much.
I see. Okay. What about the global story? A lot of people say in the last several decades, American business was really riding a wave of globalization. Today, you're more likely to hear about jobs in Buffalo and in Michigan than in Bangalore, India. So are economies looking inward?
I think so. I think there's some coming back. I think that's a good observation, and I think that's a good sign.
Do you think that's a good sign that it's not the globalization sort of openness that we saw a few years ago, and now economies are looking inward?
Glad to see us bringing jobs back to this country and rethinking some of that. I think that's very helpful.
So, final question here. What do you drive now? You driving a GM?
I'm driving a GTM Cadillac CTS-V. It's a great car. It's a hot car.
Hot Wheels. Ed Whitaker. Good to have you on the program. Thank you so much. Good to see you. Ed Whitaker, the book, American Turnaround, Reinventing and the Way We Do Business in the U.S., Reinventing GM. Up next, we're on the money, and when diamonds aren't a girl's best friend, one legendary jeweler is. If you're shopping for your Valentine, Verdura may have some answers.
I've heard jewelry jokingly called the currency of love.
And you can find us on Facebook/Maria Bartiromo. Back in a moment. Welcome back. If you're still shopping for that perfect Valentine's Day gift, Verdura might be able to help you out. Within a few Fifth Avenue blocks of names like Tiffany, Bulgari, Harry Winston, the low-profile, semi-private company has long been something of an American crown jeweler, making just a few pieces a year for some of the wealthiest of New York and Hollywood, proving all that glitters is more than just gold.
When the average American or anybody closes their eyes and says, think of jewelry, they think of big diamonds, because it's about money. I mean, the biggest diamond has to do with how rich your husband is.
Or how rich you are.
Or how rich you are, yeah.
Verdura, a jeweler with a reputation for style above price. Housed in a Manhattan salon, jewels dreamed up decades ago by Sicilian Duke Fulco Verdura for the likes of Rothschilds and royalty are still available today thanks to father and son Ward and Nico Landrigan.
I bought Verdura's name and I bought his designs. We have about 10,000 drawings that he did during his career. And I reckon, counting them out, he made about half. Since 1985, when I bought the company, I have made maybe 500 different designs. So we still have 9,500 to go.
And we have that one piece in the museum collection as well.
I think the common theme that I see with Verdura jewelry is it's very wearable. It's jewelry you can wear. It's not stuff you have to put in a bank and drag out once a year to go to the opera. The most famous thing he designed is the bracelets for Greta Garbo. And she didn't wear jewelry except for these two things. 10 years ago, before gold went crazy, they were $5,000. Now they're $20,000 because of the price of gold going up 4 times.
We work with the same workshops that made jewelry for Verdura back in the 1940s. When we make one piece, we can put the time and attention into making it just right as Verdura designed it in his original paintings, in a way that I think when you're making 500 of something, there's no way you could.
How have you been in business for so long, more than 70 years, and kept such a low profile?
When Verdura had the company, it was intentional.
It was at a party thrown by American composer Cole Porter in the 1920s that Verdura met his muse, Coco Chanel.
And she liked young men, particularly young men with a title. And she invited him to come to Paris. And no dummy he went.
These were made for Coco Chanel before Verdura was even in the jewelry business, in jewels that she'd been given. And he said, well, you're not wearing this stuff. Why don't you sort of try this? And got out a pencil and an envelope and sketched the Maltese cross cuff. Coco always wore 2. And a lot of our clients ask us, do I really need 2?
That's what I just asked Ward.
And Maria asked that very same question.
Should I be wearing 2 or 1?
Well, the answer is, do you have 2 hands?
Ward Landrigan began his career as the 25-year-old head of the jewelry department at Sotheby's, a job that introduced him to Hollywood icons Elizabeth Taylor and Sir Richard Burton.
He has to let me win once in a while.
How did jewelry play a role in their romance?
Well, the auction was just a year ago. And it brought over $100 million, which was the most ever. And the 3 pieces I sold her, of which 2 were in the sale, I sold her the Krupp diamond, and I sold her that for $305,000.
Sold for you, sir, $7,800,000.
We had a pearl that I had made a big fuss over because it had belonged to the King of Spain and Napoleon. Anyway, so Richard wanted to buy it for her for Valentine's Day, and he got it for $37,500. She hadn't had it on 10 minutes when she comes running over. She said, Ward, I lost the pearl. The only thing left was a little chain. And they were in the bridal suite at Caesar's Palace, which is the size of 2 tennis courts. And the rugs are thick pink shag, sort of Pepto-Bismol pink.
Oh, God.
So we're all on our hands and knees crawling around looking for this thing. And I crawled past a settee, and under it was one of her Lhasa Apsos going.
No. That's hilarious.
And I said, Elizabeth, the thing's had a 500-year history. You've had it 20 minutes, and your dog's eaten it already. And it brought $11.5 million at the auction.
So what have you learned about women in the 50 years that you've been in the jewelry business?
Well, I've heard jewelry jokingly called the currency of love.
That was a Valentine's Day piece.
It was. That was made originally, commissioned by Tyrone Power for his wife. He went to Verdura and said, listen, I'd like to give her something romantic.
My heart gift wrapped.
Do you plan on continuing this independent sort of ownership of this company? You've got giants around you who obviously want a piece of the action.
I guess they call it market share, and we just nibble at the market share compared to the big guys.
My thanks to Ward and Nico Landrigan. Up next, a look at the news this upcoming week that will have an impact on the money. And then remember those baseball cards we used to collect with a stick of gum? Just wait 148 years and see what it might be worth today. For more on our show and our guests, check out the website, otm.cnbc.com. And I hope you'll follow me on Twitter and on Google+. Look for @MariaBartiromo. First, though, here's a look at the stories coming up in the week ahead that may move the markets and impact your money this week. Earnings reports are out from Coca-Cola, Whole Foods, PepsiCo, and miner Rio Tinto. On Tuesday, President Obama addresses a joint session of Congress for the State of the Union address. On Wednesday, we get January's total retail sales report. Also on Wednesday, Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg will host a fundraiser for New Jersey Governor Chris Christie at his home in Palo Alto. Friday, the index of industrial production reports on activity in the manufacturing sector. And finally today, it is the stuff treasure hunters' dreams are made of. A rare 148-year-old baseball card found in a yard sale in rural Maine has been auctioned off for $92,000. The card shows the Brooklyn Atlantic Baseball Club and was found inside an old photo album by an antique hunter. He also bought some old Coke bottles and a few chairs for $100. The name of the buyer has not been released, but pretty good profit for the time invested. That's the show for today. Thank you so much for joining me each week. Keep it right here where we are on the money. Have a great week, everybody. I'll see you again next weekend.